What frightens you? Of what are you afraid? I mean, you may be afraid of a lot of things. You may not have any phobias, but you may be frightened of some things. Maybe spiders. I'm not frightened of spiders, but I kind of have a respect for some of those spiders. And like the brown recluse and the black widow. I've been bitten by a brown recluse, and I wouldn't advise you to go through that experience in life. It took me about 4 weeks to get over that brown recluse bite on my arm. And there were some days when I thought my arm was going to fall off. It hurt so bad. Maybe you're afraid of snakes. I have a respect for some of those too. But we used to live in the country, and I killed a snake once, and I felt bad about it, so I never killed one again. And we found a few in our house. I'd always take them outside and let them loose. Of course, there weren't any rattlers in our house, or that would have been a different deal. There are some snakes you need to be frightened of. Maybe you're afraid of the dark. Maybe nighttime. You don't like nighttime. Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's sorrow. Maybe it's pain. You know, the first century Christians had many things to be frightened of, many things to be sorrowful of. They had fears. They had concerns. The Roman government persecuted them. They had fear of sickness, for the remedies we have nowadays weren't available then. The cures we have nowadays weren't available. And so the things that we can be healed of back then, you died from. Maybe you're afraid of death and the grave, the great unknown. So many people don't know what's beyond the grave and don't believe there's anything beyond the grave. There were many cares that the first century Christians had, and that was a couple of them. Death and the grave. They had a life of drudgery, many of them. 2/3 of the Roman Empire were slaves, only 1/3 free. The living conditions were terrible for many. Poverty walked in rags. Living conditions were not great. Even the streets were lousy. Even you may live in the city and have a cobblestone street to walk on, but you had to walk around where the animals were on the streets also, or left their droppings. It was a dirty place to live. And if you lived in a village in the country, there weren't no paved streets. It was just the dirt. And the streets were mud holes in the rainy season and dust bowls in the dry. And you may have a fear of the sea. Back then, in the first century, not many people traveled by sea. It was a dangerous place, and they avoided the sea if at all possible. If you look with me for just a moment at the book of Acts, chapter 27, the Apostle Paul here is recorded by Luke his voyage to Rome. In chapter 25, he stood before Festus, and Festus wanted to send him down to Jerusalem to be judged by the authorities there. And the Apostle Paul said, I don't think so. I'm not going down there. I already know the fellow had to go down there and be judged by the Roman authorities. And he ended up on a cross. But since Paul was a Roman citizen, he said, I'm going to appeal to Caesar. And Festus said, well, All right, you appeal to Caesar you shall go. And so this is recorded here in chapter 27, the trip to Rome. But if you'll notice as you read through this chapter, and don't have time to read through this chapter, so I'll read some of the phrases and the sentences in the chapter. What does Luke have to say about the trip? He said, verse 4, the winds were contrary. Verse 7, they arrived with difficulty, the wind not permitting us to proceed. Verse 8, he says, passing with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens. Verse 9, sailing was now dangerous. Verse 10, this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, the Apostle Paul said. Verse 14, a tempestuous headwind arose. Verse 17, fearing lest they should be run aground. Begins to look like maybe they're having problems. Verse 18, exceedingly tempest-tossed. And then in verse 20 it says, neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest beat on us. All hope that we would be saved was finally given up. And then I love what Paul said, kind of like so many of us at times. He said, men, you should have listened to me. Verse 21. It was one of those I told you so moments. You should have listened. They continued on. They wintered and they continued on. And it says they were driven up and down in the Adriatic Sea. And finally, towards the end of the chapter, the ship is run aground in verse 41. And the stern was being broken up by the violence of the waves. The sea was a dangerous place, and very few got on the sea. There were no charts, no compass. The windstorms were great. The sea was close to winter traffic, all because they couldn't control the sea. And we can't control the sea nowadays. We may venture out on it, but the sea is a dangerous place. We said all that to say this, chapter 20 of Revelation, which was just read a few moments ago. John writes in Revelation to give people hope. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ to John, but it's written to give hope to a people who were persecuted, who had terrible living conditions. The theme of the book of Revelation, it's the Jesus Christ and his church triumphs over Satan and his forces. I saw a great white throne and him who sat upon it, from whose face the earth and heaven fled away, and there's found no more place for them. They're gone. That might sound like a good deal to the first century Christians, because they didn't have much to look forward to in this life. Well, what's after that? What's going to replace that? If heaven and earth are gone, then what? And then you look on down, and John says, the sea, verse 13, gave up the dead who were in it. And death and Hades delivered up the dead that were in them. So all of the things that people were afraid of was giving up the dead. The sea was full of dead folks from being lost at sea. Probably some folks out there even from the Great Flood. And death and Hades that they feared, all that was given up. And death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. And if you're not found written in the book of life, you're cast in the lake of fire. He's trying to give them hope that this old world is gone. But then what? You know, verse 1 of chapter 21, that really should have been part of chapter 20. But nobody asked me, or I'd have told them. Put that with chapter 20, because it completes the thought. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, That's part of that section. We're getting rid of the old heaven and earth. What replaces it? This new heaven and new earth. This great place to be. But then he also says, and there was no more sea. Seems like an afterthought, and there was no more sea. It's just one more thing is gone. One more thing that they feared. Where there were dead folks. Death and Hades were gone. Now the sea's gone. And all that's left is this new heaven and this new earth. The new comes and the old is gone. And in the new, there's no more party because there's no more death. We sing a song, at least we used to. I don't think it's in the book. Beyond this land of parting. You remember that song? I used to sing it a lot when I was a kid. Beyond this land of parting, losing and leaving. Far beyond the losses, darkening this. And far beyond the taking and the bereaving, lies the summer land of bliss. Land beyond, so fair and bright. Land beyond where there is no night. Summer land, God is its light. Oh, happy summer land of bliss. Yes, Revelation was written to give hope. Beyond this land. And there's no night. Are you afraid of the dark? Well, don't worry about it. There's no more dark. There's no more night. There's no more parting. There's no more tears. Verse 4, chapter 21, God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, no sorrow, nor crying. There's no more pain. Those of us that get a little older, get out of the bed in the morning, it takes a while just to get moving and get the kinks out. It hurts. No more of that. Why? It says, for the former things have passed away. And that's good. Verse 5, behold, I make all things new. So what's new? We got rid of this old life. Well, what's new? The first century Christians needed hope. Well, these things are new. There's no more of that. There's no more sun. Well, you don't need a sun because the Son of God's there, and He's going to be the light. You don't have to walk out there in them old streets anymore and kind of dodge the animal droppings, or you don't have to trudge through the mud anymore. What does he say? Verse 21. He said, I saw the street of the city, and it was pure gold, transparent as glass. That had to have been a great sight. Now, we're used to big 4-lane highways. They were not. Streets of gold. What a great place to walk. And they say, well, there's no more sea. I mean, there's no more water. I kind of like water. He didn't say no more water. He just said no more sea. There's water. There's a river of life. Chapter 22. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. And in the middle of its street, on either side of the river, was the tree of life. Oh, there's going to be plenty of water. And that's what's going to give you life forever. No night. No sea, but there's going to be a river of water and a tree of life. Just like there was in the beginning in that garden. There was the tree of life. And they could have lived forever. Well, now the tree of life is back. And we can live forever. There's a living stream with a crystal gleam from the throne of life. Now it flows. You have the opportunity now, if you are subject to the Lord's invitation, and if you are not in a condition that you should be in, you still have a chance. Today is the day of salvation. right now. If you need to accept the Lord's invitation in any way, we invite you to come. There's a living stream for you as we stand and sing.